Welcome to the Ascension Path with Twin Essence. I'm Lacey.
And I'm Marley, and we're your Starseed Lightworker and Psychic Medium hosts.
We're identical twins with spiritual abilities and Starseed missions on Earth. On the Ascension Path, we discuss what it's like to be identical twins serving in a spiritual capacity and provide insights into our work as Starseeds. We create a sacred space to receive channeled messages, intuitive teachings, and expansive conversations that elevate your frequency and support your evolution. Join us to learn about navigating the path to Ascension and becoming the most authentic, aligned version of you. Take what resonates and leave the rest. We are continuing with the story of Earth's inception, and we are going to be discussing in this episode the fierce, the mythical, the legendary Orion Star beings and Starseeds. Yes, this is going to be a really fun topic that I feel like many people have requested that we talk more about Orion. So just a quick recap where we took off last as we're talking about Earth's inception. The last episode was heavily focused on Lyran and Sirian star beings. And we saw tons of combustion happening between polarities on Lyra. We saw tons of combustion happening on Sirius then, following Lyra. And as that combustion continues to occur, of course, those star beings are going to flee to the next constellation or star system, which happens to be Orion. And we know that you need both polarities in order to create growth and actually serve as a catalyst to create change. So keeping that in mind as we enter the Orion saga here. Just to zoom out a little bit, we're not going to get heavy into astronomy here. We are not experts on this, but I just want to give a little bit of a visual here. When we think about Orion, most people are thinking about that belt, the 3 stars in Orion's belt, and then it kind of branches off from there. Orion in Greek mythology is known as the hunter. And then we have Sirius near Orion. Sirius is the dog star, which can be called the hunter's dog. So there's a little bit of a connection there, right? When we talk about Greek mythology, I think that we could do an entire episode straight channeling on Greek mythology and how it connects to star beings and how it connects to the history of Earth. I think about Orion, and it also has a story in Greek mythology with Scorpio and Zeus and where Zeus placed them in the sky. But I don't think we'll get too intense on that. I think that's a completely different episode in itself. Probably after we travel to Greece, that's some kind of channeling that we would bring back. But starting with Orion, the beings that fled to Orion said, we're going to do it right this time. We're going to really reach that point of integration, and these polarities, we're going to integrate it. It's not going to be a problem. Orion is the place where this is going to happen. Of course, that wasn't exactly accurate. And we see even more extremes happening on Orion. I know it sounds crazy when we talk about the wars happening in Lyra and them fleeing to Sirius and then Sirius seeing combustion again. But when Lacey and I channel on Orion, it's the extreme of the extreme. Like, it is completely opposite polarities on the spectrum. Like, each star within that constellation has its own energy, has its own polarization, and it's much more extreme than I would say Lyra or Sirius. For sure. So we start with the more negatively polarized Orions, which often channels refer to as the Orion Empire. You'll hear that term sometimes used, but they essentially were the self-serving type. They were very focused on domination. That was the name of the game. And when these beings incarnated on Orion, the veil of forgetfulness existed. When they incarnated, they forgot all of their history on other planets and the whole purpose of polarities and integration. So they incarnated new, kind of like we do on Earth, and didn't remember any of that stuff from the past. They were here to start anew. And that veil of forgetfulness was even thicker, I would say, when Lacey talks about similar to Earth, it's even thicker than Earth. And that's where we see this domination coming through, the word empire heavily associated with domination. And we see mass consciousness control. Now, I'm going to refrain from drawing those parallels to Earth right now in collective channelings, but mass consciousness control shining through with negative polarization and domination, serving of the self. We are talking about souls that do not understand how to get out of the loop. They're continually incarnating in this loop in Orion, because that veil is so thick, and the negative polarized star beings in Orion, this is the plan. This is domination. This is what they want to happen. They want to control the masses. They want to dominate, and they want to push their agenda.
And that mass consciousness, it's essentially like everyone thinks and acts the same exact way, and there is no other thought process or belief system out there other than the one ultimate belief system that they wanted everyone to have. And that gets into the reincarnating on Orion, but not actually going back to source, and some of the beings being able to escape, as they say, and slip through the veil, if you will, and then others just redoing it over and over again.
And one thing I just want to pull through they're bringing up right now is this concept of different government structures and where we can see star beings and that influence showing up in these government structures. So we talk about empire and domination. That's a negative polarization. We just looking at like democracy, monarchies, like all these different structures and where we can see these star being influences showing up. I think there's many points in ancient civilizations in history. I'm thinking about the Roman Empire in particular, where we can see this Orion influence coming through. So Rome is the one they're bringing up right now for me.
Then we move over to the positively polarized side of Orion. So these are going to be the
Serving others. This is going to be subservience to an extreme level, complete opposite of the domination and serving others. We are talking about serving others so often it is at the detriment of the self. It is about peace, heavily focused on peace.
And one of the common themes that you can see when you zoom out from one of these conflict situations with the different polarities is you will often see the victim role and then the more negative role. And typically the victim role is played by the positive side, the positive polarity. And you even see that being done across Earth right now. There's lots of government structures or countries that are certainly falling into that conflicting polarity role. And there's these two sides. There's always the victim, and then there's always the
Perpetrator.
yes, the perpetrator. That's the word I'm looking for. But here's the thing that's different with Orion. Many channels actually reported a third group and a third role that started to emerge out of this conflict.
We did talk about some slipping through the cracks, or when I say slipping through the cracks, referring to the veil, right? Some people somehow are breaking out of that cycle, that loop of domination. And that's where we see these conspiracies showing up around the Black League.
So the Black League is this third group, if you will, on Orion that essentially was an underground resistance in this society. They were the third group that thought, hey, there's a way that we can do this better and we can fight back. The issue with that belief system, though, is that it was essentially fighting fire with fire. And when you think your way of being is very different from the other polarity's way of being, but you're ultimately doing a different version of the same tactics to each other, really not one is better than the other, then. What really makes you different?
And it's channeled or speculated by many that this Black League had a specific soul that incarnated to lead this resistance, to lead an awakening, I'll put in air quotes around that, of some sort, which is how we saw more positive polarizations slipping through the cracks of that veil, which is how there is speculation that some started to break that cycle. And there's always a comparison drawn on Jesus when it comes to the soul incarnating and a spiritual awakening. Lacey and I will get into it a little bit here about what we believe from our channelings, but we feel that it's important for everybody to understand the information that's out there and what many channels are saying about Orion, the Black League, and this soul creating an awakening process is surely one that many believe.
So, this Black League underground resistance essentially didn't end up being the end all be all. We're gonna fight the power and take back Orion and what was ours, right? They ended up being very similar to the Orion Empire and not exactly helping much, other than helping certain souls flip through the veil and escape. Now, we talked about that being that they compare to Jesus that was supposed to cause this great mass spiritual awakening. So many channels do report that this mass spiritual awakening occurred in some way, shape, or form. And then that is what also turned the founders on to say, you know what? What's happening on Orion isn't exactly working again. Maybe it's time to take this project to Earth after all. And then we have Enter the Sirians and the Lyrans that are going to start Project Earth.
Lyrans, Sirians, and now we have Orions entering the picture here, talking about creating Earth, talking about that 3D reality that they want to create, a different density, a lower density that they can hopefully achieve a point of integration between polarities. We see it fail yet again on Orion. There's no integration occurring. We have two extremes occurring, and we have this thick veil that's preventing souls from moving outside of that and integrating. Another element I want to pull through is that many associate black magic or sorcery or dark magic coming from Orion and Orion Star beings. I think this is an interesting piece of information. Could it be that it's related to the Black League and the Resistance underground? Or could this piece of information really be from a negative polarization and they're viewing it in a negative light?
I think there's still a lot of fears and misconceptions out there when it comes to magic or terms like black magic and sorcery. And that comes from our DNA holding those memories of these conflicts on other planets. And that comes from the fear that negatively polarized beings actually have used to control people, maybe even control you in a different lifetime on a different planet. So, oftentimes, when people have visceral reactions to something that they don't understand or something they associate fear with, it comes from somewhere. You don't just one day have a fear. You're conditioned to believe it for a reason generationally, and sometimes it comes from a past life on a different planet.
I think too, we can connect that black magic or sorcery or that it being viewed in a negative light often can be connected back to the differences in polarizations. And maybe a soul who is positively polarized thinks it's dark and it's bad, but really it's just a different polarization. I also think that black magic or sorcery, it comes with this negative context, probably because it's a negative polarization and it's self-serving most often. Most often, like think about movie plots, right? Like we think about Hocus Pocus, or I even think of like the Mummy movies or the Scorpion King. And like it's all this like dark magic or sorcery, and it's serving self. Like it's a leader who is purely serving themselves when they're practicing that. So I think it's just a difference in polarities showing through on where the information comes from and where the views come from.
When we think about how society has depicted these kinds of topics too, it's not very often that you see someone practicing magic in a light and positive way for something that's going to help other people. It's oftentimes, like you said, depicted with more of that fear or negative or self-serving depiction. And I think that's something as a listener or viewer that you can question. Is it because all of our DNA is holding these imprints from the Orion Wars where we associate black magic or magic of any kind with a negatively polarized being?
Or is it something else? And what do we believe? So we share all this information, and really it comes down to what have Lacey and I channeled, what resonates with us, what doesn't resonate with us. It's the same thing that we always tell you listening or watching. What resonates with you? What do you believe? What information are you receiving?
The thing with this Starseed, Ascension, and New Earth work, or even just doing these episodes where we talk about the channelings and information that we know of these planets and beings and where they came from and why we're here, where it all started and came from, none of this stuff is in a history book anywhere. We don't have a history book on Earth where we can be like, ah, yes, and this is the exact timeline the Lyrans were created, and then we had Sirius and Orion.
We can't all be ancient Egypt, all right, drawing our little hieroglyphs, trying to give hints of what happened in the past.
No, we don't have a history book. All of this information comes from different channels that are connecting to source and connecting to different star beings and pulling this information through to provide to the collective. So it's not like you can look back and validate anything and everything that we've said in an episode, or that someone's written and channeled in a book for that matter, or put on a blog post. It's not verifiable or validating other than maybe you channel it on your own.
So I think I'm going to share my perspective on this, and then I want to see what Lacey's will respond with. But to start off, based on the information I've channeled and what resonates with me, I fully believe in the combustion, the extreme polarities on Orion. I do believe that there is a negative polarization there that became this veil of forgetfulness where souls ended up incarnating in a loop, not knowing how to get out. I do believe there were some slipping out of this loop that were more positively polarized. I do believe there were positively polarized beings within this constellation that were trying to fight against the negative polarizations. I do believe they work with Lyrans and Sirians and they come together for Earth's inception. The hardest part for me to channel or resonate with has to be the Black League. I know there's so many people out there that channel on this, but for me, I really question whether we are taking galactic terms and galactic occurrences and are we trying to fit them into 3D constructs that have occurred? Or is Earth echoing what's already happened out in these constellations? That's where I really struggle and try to get clarity. But of course, my human mind tries to place a linear thought process on all of this and tries to make sense of it. I really question, especially the connection to Jesus. I feel like I put Jesus into a completely different energetic category than galactic energies. To me, that's probably more of an angelic energy than it is a galactic energy.
So that's just the Sirian perspective for you coming from Marley, and she tends to be a lot more analytical when it comes to these things, whereas I tend to be a lot less analytical. So from my perspective and my channelings and experience, I would resonate with a lot of what she said, although I don't get caught up on the Black League nearly as much as she does. I know that something has to happen in order to cause a great mass awakening with these beings on this planet. And whether it was an actual group of people or a underground resistance, the Black League, whatever you want to refer to it as, something has to occur to create that change and to wake people up. So whether it be one particular special soul that incarnated to do that work or a whole group and movement that does that work, something has to occur to wake people up, to signal to the founders, hey, we're watching it play out again on Orion. It's not going the best. I think it's time to start Project Earth. So that is my experience and how I have received the information from my star beings. And I think the other thing I do want to say is when it comes to those that are comparing this special soul and saying it's where Earth got the idea to preach and create religion and talk about Jesus, I don't know the answer to that.
I
I
agree.
also think that it's fair that all of us come into our lifetimes and our work with conditioning, belief systems, and patterns. So, me being someone who's never been traditionally religious, maybe that's just my conditioning showing up that I think they're two different things and I don't think there's anything comparable between the two of them.
I would agree on that, like the religious aspect, because I don't know. I mean, I agree with you completely. Like, I do not know. Are we taking this? Are we trying to fit it into something it's not? Possibly, maybe I don't have enough religious conditioning. Or maybe I don't have the organized religious conditioning in this earthly incarnation to be able to explain that. Likely because I'm not supposed to explain that. But what I can say is that Spirit is continuously bringing up throughout this whole conversation for me elements of Earth's history and how we see these Orion influences showing up on Earth. I mentioned the Roman Empire earlier, but when we talk about a resistance, Spirit is pulling through again for me. They talk about seeing Ireland. We talk about a revolution, rebellions in Ireland where they're trying to rebel against England. They're bringing up Jacobites in Scotland. So we see these rebellions happening in Earth's history, which we again can maybe attribute to the history on Orion.
I think it's a great example of how on Earth, these different polarities and situations have happened and replayed time and time again in different parts of the world all over. But at the end of the day, it's always been the same actual conflict. It's always about one group wanting to control the others and make mass people conform to that mass consciousness control that we talked about earlier.
And not being okay with the integration, being okay that everyone's going to be different. It's like the consciousnesses on Earth are not every soul is okay with being different from each other. And that point of integration is where you reach the point, I think, of being okay with all polarities.
And why can't humans accept that we're all different? The example that is actually coming through from my star family right now, it's about music. And it's actually about when you go to concerts and you go through this collective experience as a group.
Of course, it's about concerts. She needed to find a way to work in this topic.
No, no, no. There's a method to this madness, okay?
Spirit knows how to share messages that resonate with us.
They do, but there's a method to this. So when you go to a concert, you're not sitting there like, gee, I wonder if the person in the front row is what their religion is. I wonder if the person next to me what their political views are. You're not thinking that stuff when you go to a concert. You're all there for a collective experience and you all share one thing in common. You like to some degree the music or the artist that is on stage performing. And that is a shared collective experience where humans can set aside their differences and have this transformative experience if you're doing the concert right. And that's the true test here is having that shared transformative experience. And if the musician's doing it right, it is transformative.
And what they're bringing through to me now, as Lacey is bringing this up, is Earth being a concert. Earth is a collective experience, right? It is an experience on the individual level, but it's also a collective experience. And I think many souls get tripped up in humanity and emotions rather than truly just enjoying life, taking it day by day, being okay with themselves, being okay with others, and allowing the music, I'll call it, using that concert analogy, the music that Earth plays to transform them throughout this incarnation.
Wow, that's some real lofty woo-woo Sirian channelings.
There you go. There, your mind is blown today by that message. Is Earth really just one giant concert? One giant music festival that we are all currently attending? Some are in mosh pits, others are out in the fields smelling the flowers, and we all need to find a way to come together.
It's a good point though when you think of it, like why can't we as humans set aside our differences and let ourselves celebrate our differences rather than looking at them as a negative thing? And when you actually really truly think about it, the world would be such a boring place if we were all under one mass consciousness and belief system. There would be no growth. There would be no point to being here if everybody thought the same way and everybody was exactly the same. So I think when we talk about Orion, this is the information coming through. I do believe it from our channelings that we've both had experiences where we understand the different polarities on Orion. We understand that there was control of them. There was a reincarnation loop where people weren't able to get out, and there were the people that were escaping. I think where it's blurry and open to interpretation is the channelings that come through with that underground resistance and what actually caused the
Yes.
mass awakening that signaled to the founders, let's start Project Earth now because Orion, this shit ain't working out.
Yes, right there. That is it exactly as Lacey and I channel it and what resonates with us. Now, what I think is fascinating about this and what's pulling through energetically today is that Orion star beings and star seeds, so people who have those Orion origins and incarnate on Earth, they sometimes get a little bit of a hardened rep, I would say. I think they come off as they can be warrior energy, which can be similar to Lyran's. However, this is a different level. This is a higher level of extreme, in my opinion, when they come through energetically. And they also have a very, I'll say, laissez-faire approach. I don't know why that is coming through, but that is coming through strongly here. There is some type of French influence coming through right now, and it's something to do with the resistance because when we're talking about this resistance and channeling on it, I keep hearing like La Resistance, and then like immediately the movie Les Mis popped into my head. I've never even watched Les Mis. Like I don't know anything about it, so I'll probably have to Google that after this is done recording. There's a French influence coming through here. I just have to put that out there. Everything you hear today, don't ever think that we're the best at impressions, but we will continue to do the impressions and the little voices because that's just how we describe things. I am probably butchering this right now, but that is what's coming through, truly. And laissez-faire, so if you don't know what that means, that's a legitimate economical term? Policy term? No, laissez-faire is just like a way of being. Laissez, well, no, it's in history books. I remember learning about it in
Is
fifth
it?
grade. Yes, I distinctly remember the day I read laissez-faire in a history book in school. It was used in a political sense though, because laissez-faire is like hands off, right? Translation, hands off. Meaning when Lacey and I have connected with Starseeds on Earth right now who have Orion origins and Orion energy, it's been very much like, this is me. I don't know what everyone has a problem with. Like, I'm just being myself. Like, I am what I am. That's how it comes through to me. And I feel like part of that is because Orion has actively and consciously made the effort to plant seeds on Earth that are probably more integrated and balanced in polarity than when we talk about the Orion Wars, where they're extremes. To me, Orions always come through as being detached from 3D human constructs. They don't feel concerned with what the average human's concerned with. That is spot on to how they come through to me as well. You said it in a much more eloquent way. I want to point out too, not to confuse it with the Zetas. All right? We have not talked about Zetas yet. Do not confuse it for ambivalence of the Zetas. There's a huge difference there in how these beings come through energetically. Big difference. But going with that Orion energy, they tend to be more hardened and stubborn when it comes to things. I would also say there's like a little bit of a rebellious streak too. Yes. They don't want anyone telling them what to do, and I think that comes from years of suppression and control, people. Their DNA carries it. They often are the black sheep of the family as well. They just don't fit in a normal way, which is very common for most starseeds, but it's a little different for Orions, and it comes from that rebellious side and that they don't want to be controlled by anyone. I think too, at today's point in Earth's ascension, many of Orion's starseeds, while they do have that rebellious streak in them, it's not in the same controlling sense necessarily. There's definitely a spectrum of how these traits can manifest in the human incarnations, but it's not as heavily about domination, in my opinion. I think there are some other starseed types on Earth right now that are more heavily towards the domination end of the spectrum, not necessarily Orion starseeds, though. While they are rebellious, they're not doing it in a controlling way. They are doing it in a way that's like, this is what I believe, and you can't tell me what to do. So it's more in that way than I'm thinking about the like Irish Republican Army right now. Like, that could be a manifestation of Orion in that point in our history on Earth and Ascension. It used to be more like a really violent type of rebellion that was in your face, and now it's more like I do what I want and you can't tell me what to do. Definitely, I think a lot of them that have incarnated here are more balanced, like you said. The other thing is when we've channeled Orion star beings, they typically, for us at least, have appeared as these blue, more masculine beings. And I think that comes with that warrior energy and that survivorship from Orion. Yes, I agree. They're very much in their masculine energy. I think sometimes they come through with the capes and armor. They could have swords on them. Imagine you take like White Walkers from Game of Thrones and you make them galactic. Yes, yes, that's definitely some GOT vibes. Let's get that CGI going. We don't use AI in anything that we do, so I'm sorry that you're not going to have this cool like depiction created of what these beings look like. Another comparison is like Vikings. I always think Vikings, like it's like earthly manifestation of how we see Orions.
Definitely. Then we get into the Mintaka starseeds.
So Mintaka is one of the stars within Orion's belt, and I don't think we'd be complete today if we didn't talk about more of the positive polarization too. And Mintakan starseeds are heavily connected to ocean and bodies of water. I think about crustaceans, I think about any aquatic animals really or marine life oftentimes are associated with Mintakans, and it's very similar to Sirians, you might say. So some people might confuse the two, but there is a different energy there. How a Mintakan starseed comes through as opposed to a Sirian starseed.
So Mintaka is a star in the Orion constellation. So you can be an Orion starseed, but you can also have more of a specific niched down starseed lineage. And this is what comes through during twin magic readings, where we dig into that and we see who steps forward when you dig into your starseed lineage.
I will also add that each star within that constellation in Orion is going to have different polarities. Only because when you examine Mintaka and you compare it to maybe a different polarity in Orion, it is like night and day. Because Mintaka is so positively polarized. It's like you go there and everything's sparkling and water and there's mer people. And then you see flashes of other stars within the constellation and it's like fire and volcanoes and it is like pure masculinity and domination.
Mintaka star beings often appear very gentle to me. They're much more easy and breezy. They're much more flexible and loose. There's a little bit more of the feminine connection, but Orions tend to be a little more masculine energetically. But they are just softer and they have a gentler energy than just your average Orion star being. So that's how they always come through for me.
It's very peaceful, I think, too. I always associate them with peace. It's just pure positivity. And I think just comfortability of allowing people to be who they are.
For our Orion starseeds out there listening, don't let anyone try and tell you that Orions are negative or bad or carry all of this weight with them from their past. You are here on Earth for a reason, and you have just as important of a job to do as the other starseeds that are currently incarnating here. So we're happy to have you on this special Project Earth with all of us.
I will also add that we see a lot of this karma from the Orion Wars playing out on Earth, right? That's why so many of these historic events are being brought up by Spirit today. But you've come a long way on your integration, just like Lyrans and just like Sirians. Nobody is better than anybody in their cosmic origins. And while we might see extremes and Orion may be known for having wars, we've seen the same thing happen on Lyra and Sirius. So we are not casting shadows by any means.
And we do not have all of our shit together or figured out in any way, shape, or form clearly.
It's that veil of forgetfulness, man. It really trips you up. You get here and you're like, how am I supposed to remember all this again? Come on this journey.
But it is cool because look at how we incarnated together, and now we're able to channel this information and bring it forward for the collective for this very special time as Earth is waking up and ascending.
And we always talk about it's a remembering, right? Your cosmic origins are remembering. When you have galactic energies coming through, it's because you're starting to remember. And every time we are channeling on this information and sharing it with everybody out there, it is part of the process of remembering as we ascend on Earth.
And this journey of remembering is not perfect. It can be very difficult, which is why our incarnation is focused on helping those who are ready to remember and wake up and ascend, connect to their origins, understand why they're actually here, and what they're meant to do on Earth right now. So, those are our twin magic readings, and you are welcome to head to twinessence.com to check out what those are all about.
To wrap up, we have Lyrans, we have Sirians, and now we have Orions on board, ready to create Earth. But they start to involve the Pleiadians. And that is what we'll be talking about in our next episode. If you've enjoyed listening or watching, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube.